Well, that's the next conversation we want to have this morning ahead of the ECOWAS meeting about the coup in Niger with the expiration of the deadline. A host of people have been talking about it. Some meetings held yesterday, as we have demonstrated to you on the front pages of the papers this morning. But Professor Demola Abbas joins us this morning. He's a professor of international law and global affairs analyst. He's a visiting senior research fellow, University of Reading in the UK. And he was at some point a special advisor to Lagos State Governor on overseas affairs and investment. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, clearly, there have been quite a number of steps taken by different interests groups about the coup in Niger. Some have identified one or two of those steps as missteps, and some have said, you know, all kinds of shades of opinions have emanated and so on. So far, what are your thoughts? There's another meeting holding today, but before that meeting, let's have a conversation around what your thoughts are about the steps that have been taken, the processes so far, and the reactions of Niger and a number of other global interests.
Well, once again, thanks for having me. Look, it's a very loaded question because there's a lot of misconceptions going on and misunderstanding of the processes itself. First, I think what has provoked a lot of reactions was a report, right or wrong, that the president of Nigeria had requested the Senate, for instance, to deploy troops to Niger, you know, in response to the recalcitrance of the coup plotters in Niger. That is one side. We'll come to that in a moment. But in terms of the processes itself, what ECOWAS has done so far is to impose sanctions, strap the air, economic sanctions and this and that. These are within the authority of ECOWAS to do. ECOWAS is an international organization, albeit a sub-regional organization in Africa here. We only have one continental organization in Africa, that is the African Union itself. You know, ECOWAS has got 15 member states, all of which voluntarily signed up to ECOWAS Treaty in 1975, precisely May 28th. I think the only member that was not a founding member at that point in time was Cape Verde, which joined them in 1977, just 2 years after. So all of them were voluntary. They voluntarily joined ECOWAS. And when you join an international organization, so you assume certain obligations, you know, under that particular constituent treaty, be it an instrument, be it a treaty or convention that brings you together. So ECOWAS member states voluntarily subjected themselves to certain obligations and responsibilities by accepting to be members of the association or the organization. So therefore, you have community norms. These are the norms of ECOWAS, which have been established consistently either by its own treaty of 1975, reviewed and revised in 1993, and you have so many protocols that I'll come to later. And all these instruments lay down certain principles and guidelines, and also certain, punitive measures if any member state will violate the norms of ECOWAS. So Niger violated the norms of ECOWAS, which is to allow what is called an unconstitutional change of government in Niger. When that happens, it's normal that the organization will have to respond to its members by saying, look, we agree that we will not allow an unconstitutional changeover of government in our member state. This has happened in your state. And because it has happened, ECOWAS has got to take measures. There are measures that you as a country has also agreed to. One of them is we are going to impose sanctions on you, and we might decide to suspend you. And when we suspend you during that time, you still have to implement whatever sanctions we impose on you. So everything ECOWAS has done so far actually has been in accordance with its own principles and regulations.
That raises a question for me. How well or seriously do countries, these countries that you talk about, percolate that information to their citizens? The question is because, of course, we are not unaware of the reaction of Nigerians and some Nigerians also to the declarations and the initiatives that have been taken by, by the ECOWAS already. Electricity cut off in the Niger and the reactions that are following that, which you say, yes, Nigerians signed to in 1975, but the citizens today have no idea what all of that is. So it begs the question of whether or not we are carrying our people along. in our decisions for them?
You know, Ayo, that's a very vital, important point you've raised. And it's important because it goes to the root, cause of the major problems that are faced in Africa by African organizations. Whether you are African Union, or you are ECOWAS, or you are SENSAD, or you are ECAS, or you are SADC, no matter what you are in Africa. And that is the question of what is the relationship between your organization and the citizenry of that particular hemisphere. And we don't do that very well in Africa. As an example, in EU, as an example, almost every European Union is taught what EU is all about. There are courses in EU in schools. You understand the process. You understand what the European Union means. They form parts of their syllabi and this and that in the schools. And you'll be shocked that even from, as early as from primary schools, education, they are already taught. So citizens actually understand what the processes are. But because organizations in Africa are formed on very pali level, my brother, my sister, my this and that. So you have leaders who bring them together to form an organization, not primarily to advance the cause of citizenry as much as to advance their own personal and individual causes. So there is no felt need at any point in time to actually carry the citizens along. You will carry your citizens along if they are the primary reason, or they are the reason deter that you are forming the organization for. Let me give you an example. When the Organization of African Unity was formed in 1963, OAU was formed at a time when much of Africa was still under colonialism. So we felt at that point in time we needed all the free states in Africa to come together and use their muscle to be able to pressurize the colonialists to give colonial independence to remaining countries in Africa, including South Rhodesia, that former Zimbabwe, and so on and so forth. So there was need for number at that point in time. So nobody could really adhere to the principle of human rights and this and that. And in 1963, we thought all those principles were just luxurious. What we wanted in 1963 first was to get independence from imperialists, from colonialists. And that was why Nkrumah said that seek ye first political kingdom, everything shall be added unto it. So that was what led back to the OAU. So there were no concrete principles and rules that were guiding OAU in terms of human rights and what have you. Now fast forward 2000, when the African Union was going to be formed from the death of OAU. I mean, I was opportune to work for the African Union in 2005 as an expert who drafted a treaty between an MOU between the African Union and the regional organization, what you call REX, with that regional economic communities like ECOWAS and ECAS and SENSAD and what have you. And the argument we had then in the academic point of view was that was the time for African leaders to sit back and put citizenry at the core of what they were going to do at that point in time. That let's learn the lessons from the failure of the OAU. OAU didn't really serve the continent very well, but after Zimbabwe became independent, the original political reason for the formation of OAU died. But they couldn't transform into the new millennium because they didn't carry people along, and OAU became as dead as dodo. So it was necessary that AU was going to emerge, but on what principle? And I remember then arguing that, look, all we should do in Africa was for our leader to say, we are only going to start on a very microscopic level. Take democratic countries in Africa, about 5 or 6 of them, to say, let's form a union, just like the European Union started, with the EEC. Just 6 countries, basically at that point in time. Let's start with a small share of countries that are already democratic, that have put human rights at the core, that have put their people's sanctity, their people protection and advancement at the core of the community values. Start with that. Call it the African Union on a very small level. Then when you establish your principles and they are well grounded, begin to invite, let individual member states that are not begin to, apply to become members. Then you can say, well, you want to become member of African Union? Do you have human rights? Do you put people this and that? Do you have employment? Do you establish all those? Just as the European Union did. Well, but unfortunately, we didn't do that. What did we do in 2000? We brought all countries again into the AU. And that is a problem. There's never a deliberate attempt to carry African citizenry along the formation of, and that answers your question. And that is why there's never a need. We never have a felt need to explain what we are doing to the citizens.
Well, Mr. Abbas, you know that just to buttress that, there will be a huge question mark on the commitment to the principles establishing the union. When you look at what brought about the coup in Niger, for instance, we've cited the coupists have cited desertification, poverty, population explosion, corruption, and just to tie it also to the conditions in those states that are bordering Niger in Nigeria, the conditions are similar. So if you consider that there is language similarity, Hausa is spoken in Niger, Kanuri is spoken in Niger, how real is the possibility of that coup contagion, for it to trickle down to Nigeria, hence, the rallying of ECOWAS?
But it's a very vital point you raised, Bukola. It's vital because it is a chicken and egg situation. It's a kind of damn you do, damn you don't. For people who are saying, oh, you know what, the coup is very popular and this and that, but the truth is, coups are going to be popular anyway. Because if you don't agree with soldiers when they take over, you're not going to go on the street and start campaigning against them. They will mow you down. And number one. Number two, it is natural for soldiers, however, when they take over government, unconstitutionally to say, we are doing it, they have to justify why they are taking over. It doesn't mean that the reasons they are advancing actually are, legitimate. It doesn't mean that, those reasons, we should accept them. But they have reasons. But whether soldiers have taken over or not, the question is, are those conditionalities existing in Niger? Of course they are existing in Niger. In fact, they are existing in most of Africa. But does that then give the right to now say, so therefore, we must have one democratic government? And that is a question of trickling down. Look, and that's why I say it's a damn you do, damn you don't question. If ECOWAS does not put its feet down, and I'm not saying go and use force, I'll come to that discussion later. If ECOWAS does not put its feet down against its member state, it's happened in Mauritania. In fact, Mauritania withdrew its membership in 2000. The only country that's withdrawn from ECOWAS in 2000. Tried to re-adhere in 2017. It happened there. Mali happened. Burkina Faso happened. Guinea happened. So the question is, when will it stop? If it continues, then the question is, what is the value of the treaty that you signed to, that you wouldn't want this to? In other words, ECOWAS cannot sign a treaty, member state cannot sign a treaty, and then say, well, we've signed this treaty, we have committed that there will be no unconstitutional takeover of government, but we don't care. Now we are going to keep on doing it. You don't expect ECOWAS to so they fold its arms and say, well, it's okay. Oh, because it's your country. Oh, because all these conditions also happen in Nigeria and they happen in Ghana, so therefore we are going to allow you. If you allow that, where would the rot stop? It could stop, it to go to the other thing. That begs the question, of course, of there are things that ECOWAS should be doing inside its member states to make sure the conditions that lead to those situations as Niger do not arise in the first place. That's $1 billion question that we must address.
Well, Professor Abbas, it seems like sanctions are not working. If Ayo talked about the power cut, even the US announced, the withdrawal of aid to the tune of $100 million. So it seems like sanctions are not working. Is ECOWAS, taking into cognizance the more real contention of interests of other powers in Niger and in, other neighboring countries on the coup belt, i.e. Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea?
Well, ECOWAS is not a naive organization by any standard. They're a key player. Don't forget, we've got a long history of solving crises in West Africa. Go back to when it started in Liberia in 1997. Go back to when it went to Sierra Leone. In fact, ECOWAS will be the first organization in Africa as a whole, if not anywhere in the world, that will restore a democratically elected government that was overthrown by coup. And that was when it restored Tijan Kaba in Sierra Leone in 1998. That will be the first time it will happen in Africa. So ECOWAS had a track record of that. However, the conditionalities in 1998 that led to the restoration of Tijan Kaba in Sierra Leone are different radically from what we have today in Niger. And ironically, Nigeria played a critical role in installing Tijan Kaba in 1998. And that was the biggest irony. It was a military regime in Nigeria, Abacha, that actually led ECOMOG to go and restore a democratic government in Sierra Leone, whereas today it's a civilian government that is trying now to, it's quite interesting. But it's an interesting question, because, as I said, ECOWAS is not naive, and there are many interests that are intertwined here, and that is going to go, I'm not preempting, I think we are going to discuss whether we should use force or not. That is going to go to the question of what are we going to do if sanctions fail. And sanctions are not going to bite very hard, because, to be honest with you, number one, Nigeria is the most robust player in West Africa here. So when you're talking about ECOWAS imposing sanctions, you're talking about Nigeria largely imposing sanctions, and a few other states. But in terms of US imposing sanctions or France, well, it's quite iffy. It's iffy because as they are going to be doing that, Russia is also trying to get a foothold. Don't forget, in Central African Republic, you already have Wagner in Central African Republic. They just, a few days ago, they signed an agreement now with the Niger coupists that they can come to Niger. Niger has the largest deposit of uranium.
The US has in fact expressed concern
about that. Well, they can express concern. Nigerians are not going to care about that. But the truth is, what I'm saying is that the interests are intertwined. There's uranium in that country, which has been mined consistently by France and some other countries.
Can ECOWAS match up to that, to those interests?
Well, that ECOWAS will match up to those interests if ECOWAS itself is not being pocketed by those interests.
Which raises the question, if I can quickly follow up on the conversation that the trajectory that Bukola started. So it would seem like Africa is a play field of sorts for world powers. We've had British Prime Minister at some point, Russia-Africa Conference, China-Africa Conference, France-Africa Conference, US-Africa Conference. So it's like the jostle is now for Africa. Everyone wants to come to Africa. I go back to the issue I raised about the interest of the people. You've spoken about, so loftily too, about the fact that ECOWAS is not naive, and consequently you're saying the EU is not naive. But then it would seem like there are more individualistic approach to issues than regional or collegiate approach by these institutions. Consequently, it's easier for these world powers that Bukola talks about to break the ranks, if I can use it, say it that way.
Well, that is apt. But it doesn't only happen in ECOWAS. So you have it in the United Nations, as big as the UN is. Look, United States pays.
Does it happen in the EU?
It happens in the EU. Whatever France and Germany want in the EU, sometimes they can steamroller themselves in. However, let's compare apple with oranges. Let's compare apple with apple in the sense that when you talk about European Union, for instance, you're talking about an organization that is supranational. That's number one. You know that when you are supranational, you know that the organization has certain powers beyond the member states themselves. We don't have a single supranational organization in Africa. You must understand that. Yet, I mean, Africa, we don't have one. I don't think we are going to get there anytime soon at all, because what it takes to get to supranationality is you are conceding a substantial part of your sovereignty to that organization. And if you disagree, you just have to withdraw, which is what Britain did, which is Brexit, basically. So we haven't got to that state in Africa. I don't think African leaders actually minded to that particular point. But in terms of the interest and what you are talking about, let's look at it from this angle. ECOWAS as an organization comprises different countries, about 15 countries that had different colonial experiences. You only have 5 English-speaking countries in ECOWAS. You've got about 8 French-speaking countries in ECOWAS, and only 2 that are, Portuguese, and 1 Arabic, Mauritania, which has already left ECOWAS. ECOWAS doesn't really, and that goes to does ECOWAS give anything to its member states to actually make them to want to listen to that organization? They don't, just like the African Union. Because when you're talking about the ability of an organization to go against its member state, basically, you're talking about what are the sticks, what are the carrots. Turkey is one of the finest countries in Europe today, one of the strongest economies in Europe. That's Turkey as a country. Turkey is not a member of the European Union. Turkey is doing everything to join the EU, because Turkey knows that if it becomes a member of the European Union, it means Turkish students could go and study in Europe and pay home fee like any European. Turkish farmers will get subsidies. There will be borderless Europe for Turks and this and that. So there are a lot of carrots you get. But when you violate a community norm, European norm, there are sticks. They will clumber you with sanctions, and those sanctions will bite massively. So we haven't got that at all.
Okay, anyway, it's interesting where you put it that way, but I think Marco has a question for you. Go ahead.
And again, it was saying that the conversation all boils down to values, that, the ECOWAS has to actually define what its values are. But let me quickly take you up on what has happened so far. I mean, our reaction, that's ECOWAS's reaction to the coup in Niger. Some people have said that it's been a mistake from the get-go. I know that they were trying to put out a very strong statement when they had that initial meeting here in Abuja. But do you think that it was a mistake to have also tabled tabled use of force as part of, some of the options that they were considering, because some analysts have said that that was a mistake from the get-go. Do you agree with them?
Thank you very much, Mark. Absolutely not. I don't agree with them, and I will explain why not. As I was explaining earlier on, you join an organization voluntarily, and one of the treaties or one of the protocols signed by ECOWAS member state, there was one in 1999, very powerful. There was one in 2001. Now, those two protocols, 1999 and 2001, make it very clear. Precisely the one in 2001 is called Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance. Now, that protocol in Article 45 makes it clear that if there is an unconstitutional change of government in a member state, then ECOWAS could authorize the use of force. The same thing is contained in Article 10, paragraph C of the 1999 protocol relating to the mechanism for conflict resolution, peacekeeping, security, and prevention. Again, it gives ECOWAS the right to use force in its member state. However, the use of force or military solution is not the first place to start. It is graduated. ECOWAS could decide to impose sanctions, and it has been doing that. Just like the United Nations itself, you impose sanctions. If sanctions do not bite, if they do not work, nothing stops you from authorizing the use of force. So if anybody is saying, well, ECOWAS shouldn't have threatened use of force, then they don't understand how international organizations work. They're not conversant with the protocols and the treaties of ECOWAS, all of which give ECOWAS the power to use force if it must use force against its member state. However, and that is a caveat, it does not mean that in every situation there is a coup or any kind of unconstitutional change of government, you must immediately use force or you must go to use force. That is not the argument here. So I'm separating the legal appropriateness of ECOWAS to use force, which it has the right to do. I'm separating that from whether in this particular situation the occasion has risen for you now to go and use force. And I don't think, and then that's another misconception. President Ashiraju did not say we are taking ECOWAS to go and use force. What he was talking about, number one, let me make some clarification. Nigeria, as a member of ECOWAS, cannot on its own decide to take ECOWAS to go and use force. No. Nigeria is just one out of 15 countries. All the countries must agree to go and use force. So once the Mediation and Security Council, the MSC of ECOWAS, agrees to go and use force, and they've decided, then it behoves on individual member states, just like Nigeria and any other ECOWAS member, to then go to their own parliament to seek authorization for that nation to be able to deploy its troop. So there are two different approvals here. An approval done by ECOWAS itself, among its own member states, to go and use force against a misbehaving member state. That is one. Once that is done, it doesn't mean that all those members there automatically will send troops there. You then have to go back home and then tell your government or tell your president, will then go to the Senate and say, well, we want to join the troops that are going to deploy. Let me give you an example. In 1997, there was a major crisis, no, 2000, while ECOMOG deployed in Sierra Leone, and United Nations deployed its own mission, United Nations Observer Mission in Sierra Leone, UNAMSIL. There was a crisis between ECOMOG, which wanted to use force in Sierra Leone to restore peace, and United Nations, we did not want to use force. It was so bad that Nigeria and Ghana, if you remember very well, had to withdraw from that particular mission, although they went back. That tells you something. Individual members of ECOWAS can take actions when you collectively agree to go and use force and say, okay, we've decided to go and use force, but as a country, my parliament has not agreed that I should deploy my troops. So that is a different issue entirely. So straight away, for those who are saying ECOWAS made a mistake in saying that there was no mistake, the law is loud and clear. It has the right to authorize use of force. It must. However, I'm saying on this occasion, the question is it as the occasion has risen now for it to go and use force? That's $1 billion question.
Well, some people also said that the 7-day ultimatum which was given to Niger was too short. I mean, if there were going to be negotiations, there were going to be sanctions, there were going to be mediation, all of that had to come within a certain period. We've seen those attempts now, but it would seem that what has really riled Niger, and we've also seen the, Mali and Burkina Faso saying, look, an attack on Niger will be an attack on us. It would seem that what has really taken the attention has been ECOWAS's threat that, you know, the use of force was not off the table. So I think that's basically where a lot of people too are also saying maybe that could have been a mistake. But right now, today, they're supposed to have another meeting. What do you think that ECOWAS should be looking at as a next step to take on this matter of Niger?
Well, thank you very much, Mark. That's a very important question. And let me start with your last question. ECOWAS still has a lot of things to do before it can even talk about the use of force in Niger. As an example, even if ECOWAS were to agree, if every member of ECOWAS will agree today on the use of force, make no mistake, it doesn't mean that ECOWAS can go and use force. For any regional organization anywhere in the world, and quote me on this, to use force, you must seek the authorization of the Security Council under Chapter 8, or precisely Article 53 of the UN Charter. It forbids any regional organization to use force without the authority of Security Council. And we know very well that Security Council will never agree to that anyway, because China and Russia can preemptively are not going to, you know, play ball with that. They will never support that. And all of you must agree, or two of them must abstain. That is one question. So let's put that one aside. That even if all ECOWAS member states agree, there is no legitimacy for that use of force unless Security Council approves it. And I don't want to go into academic debate about what is called ex post facto authorization. That's a different, let's leave that to the academia for now. So that is there. So I think for now, what ECOWAS should do is to look deeply into its own treaties and the protocols and say, has it been doing enough in respect of how its own member states actually deliver their democratic promises to their citizenry? I think that is what ECOWAS has not been doing very well. ECOWAS should not be rearing its head only when unconstitutional changes of government take place in its member state. We know its treaty forbids that, its protocols forbid that, but then you should have a system in which ECOWAS is able to enthrone, you know, to empower people in member state jobs, make sure that your member state do what the European Union does, basically. That is to learn on how to deliver democratic value, democratic, you know, dividends to your people. When you don't do that, then there's a problem at the end of the day. That is what is not being done. And that is what I think ECOWAS should be looking at. Number two, ECOWAS needs to collaborate very closely with the African Union on this. I haven't heard so much about it because don't forget, Niger is in West Africa, but Niger is in Africa. And African Union takes premiership when it comes to issue of peace and security in Africa. But that is again one thing that we have not done very well. The third thing is ECOWAS needs to collaborate more closely with the United Nations. That, God forbid, if this should ripen into war, Nigeria itself and all ECOWAS member states come together, cannot prosecute a war successfully, you know, against Niger. And that is because you have Niger also being supported by countries like Russia. The other day, Wagner signed an agreement with the new government in Niger. So there's so much to clear before you even begin to think about the use of force. And that is why I said that legally speaking, yes, ECOWAS can use force, but politically speaking, it is suicidal at this point in time for anybody to even think about the use of force. But more importantly, is that ECOWAS needs to begin to look into its own values, human rights values, democratic values, and everything that a modern, a 21st century compliant organization should deliver to its people should start looking into that. It should not only be shouting and screaming when one of its own member states decide to go the cool way, which obviously is when one of their own colleagues get bumped off. They shouldn't be shouting only when that happens. They must take all those things on board.
Well, I think essentially that has summarized a lot of the criticism that we've seen on this particular matter. But what do you also make of those who say that this is not so much a coup against the president? I mean, Bazoum only took power in 2021. He was only elected in 2021. And some people say this is not so much a coup against Bazoum as it is a rejection of France's overbearing influence on Francophone African nations.
Well, I've read a lot about that. If that was the case, then congratulations to the Francophone Africans. That is, if that actually happens to be the case. Because indeed, and that is why ECOWAS really has not really functioned very well for a long time. Because there is this endemic and very systemic suspicion of Nigeria as a regional hegemon within ECOWAS. It goes back to in Liberia, don't forget Liberia and Sierra Leone, when Nigeria was mobilizing, you know, ECOMOG to go into those two countries to go and stabilize, and as ECOMOG said, to go and stop the senseless killing, for instance, in Liberia at that point in time. France wasn't very happy. Francophone Africa did not actually play ball because they were suspicious of Nigeria. Maybe, who knows, maybe 25 years down the road, they've suddenly woken up and thought, you know what, it's high time we reclaimed our country, from France.
Yeah.
I'm saying it is in the public there, but I'm not entirely
sure. Do you see it happening? Do you see that deliverance, if I can use the term?
Well, look, it's not something that is going to happen overnight. They always say Rome was not built in a day.
Just so happens,
and it wasn't destroyed in a day either.
This is not Rome, this is Africa. But quick one on this one, just about 30 seconds if you can take it.
Yeah.
What should be the preparation or action to be taken by the states that border Niger, 7 of them?
Oh, well, that's very interesting because whether there's going to be use of force or not, and I hope there'll be no use of force, already this is going to create tension. There's going to be movement already. I'm learning that some nationals, I don't want to say Nigerians alone, in Niger are already getting jittery that if ECOWAS would, but there'll be retaliation. So, for instance, Office of Migration, both within and internationally, we'll have to start preparing to receive some new refugees. Northeast is in that Sahel, especially. There's going to be a knock-on effect. And unfortunately, if this happens, it means Nigerians are going to be refugees themselves. Then where do they go? It was different from 1997, 2000, when Liberia and Sierra Leone happened. A lot of Liberian refugees came down to Nigeria. But then, so we need a lot of preparation to start making. Because and that is why I think ultimately we need to douse the tension immediately and begin to look for an amicable and peaceful resolution of the conflict.
Thank you so much, Prof. I mean, it's a lot of work, and as you said, let's hope that the outcome of today's meeting by ECOWAS is going to show some, how do we say, light at the end of the tunnel.
Amen to that.
Professor Ademola Abbas is a professor of international law and is a global affairs analyst. Thank you again for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me again. Thank you.
Well, some of your own contribution to this program are here now. This one is it's an email from Usmanovic, who says, indirectly, the war has been declared, and I certainly need nobody to interpret the meaning of sanctions and border closure as over 106 trucks of onions of our members in Mile 12 International Market have been trapped and already dripping water.
Oh, there you go. Well, this one is from Dakpo Oduwole. He says, my question is this. What is the function of ECOWAS, AU, and UN in respect of corrupt political leaders to justify their posture when a corrupt leader is ousted for bad governance and corruption? If they're mute during bad rule, then they lack justification. Well, that's from Dakpo Oduwole. Malpe.
And this tweet from Festus Akimboyewa says, it's not correct to say that we don't have Nigeria's national values. Majority of Nigerians have a belief in freedom, tolerance of others, respecting and upholding the rule of law, hard work, and dignity of labor. Sadly, these values are not allowed to flourish and develop. These values must be taught in our schools, and there must be strong institutions that will help develop these values. I think essentially that's what Mr. Michael Mary was saying, how to nationalize these values which we already know and we are taught in schools. How do they play in our national existence, Jimmy?
Well, at this point in time, I'm going to have to read the second stanza of National Anthem, considering what all of us are going through. So I'd like you all to see it as well, so that you can go with us as we just take you through all of that, because we need these prayers. O God of creation, direct our noble cause. Guide our leaders right. Help our youth the truth to know. In love and honesty, to grow and living just and true. Great lofty heights attain, to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign. That is the show today. We thank you all for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Musa. Goodbye.
Indeed, maybe we should have that prayer pasted somewhere. We say it every morning. Say it every morning, wherever it is you are. Thank you so much for watching today. I'm Malpe Ogunyusi. Goodbye.
And after saying the prayers, go out and do the work. Thank you for watching. I'm Bukola Koka.
Did I hear anyone say amen? Have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.